In the summer of 2002, two 10-year-old girls walked out of a house in Soham, Cambridgeshire, and were never seen alive again. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were best friends. They were wearing matching red Manchester United shirts that evening. They had just left a family barbecue. It was a warm Sunday night in a quiet town where nothing like this was supposed to happen. Their families waited. Then the hours turned into days. And then, slowly, the full picture of what had happened to them began to emerge. And it was worse than almost anyone had imagined. This is Dark Reflex. Tonight, we are going back to one of the most devastating child murder cases in British history, and to the news that, in early 2026, the man who committed those murders finally died inside a prison cell, under circumstances almost as violent as the crimes that put him there. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were both 10 years old and lived in Soham, a small market town in Cambridgeshire, England. On the evening of Sunday, the 4th of August, 2002, they attended a family barbecue at the home of Holly's parents. Sometime around 9:17 p.m., the two girls left the house and walked a short distance to visit a man they knew, Ian Huntley, the caretaker at Soham Village College, the local secondary school. Huntley was 28 at the time. He was in a relationship with Maxine Carr, who had been a teaching assistant at the girls' primary school and knew them personally. The girls knew the address. They knocked on the door. Huntley let them in. That was the last time anyone saw Holly Wells or Jessica Chapman alive. What followed was a 13-day disappearance that gripped the entire United Kingdom. Search parties combed the fields and waterways around Soham. The case was on every news channel. Parents across Britain were holding their children a little tighter. And through all of it, Ian Huntley gave media interviews, standing outside his house, appearing composed, claiming to be the last person to have seen the girls alive, and expressing his hope that they would be found safe. On the 17th of August, 2002, 13 days after Holly and Jessica vanished, their bodies were found. They had been dumped in a ditch near RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk, about 11 miles from Soham. They had been burned in an attempt to destroy evidence. Forensic investigators worked the scene carefully. Fibers from the girls' clothing were later found inside Huntley's house. A strand of Holly's hair was found in Huntley's vacuum cleaner. The girls' clothing had been discarded in a bin at the college where Huntley worked, and fabric fibers linked directly back to him. The evidence was overwhelming. Ian Huntley was arrested on the 20th of August, 2002. Maxine Carr was arrested the same day, not for the murders, but for providing Huntley with a false alibi. She had been in Grimsby that weekend and had no knowledge of what he had done, but she had initially told police he had not been in contact with the girls. Huntley's trial began in November 2003. He admitted the girls had been in his house. He claimed Holly had had a nosebleed and that Jessica had accidentally drowned in the bath, and that he had panicked. The jury did not believe him. On the 17th of December, 2003, Ian Huntley was found guilty of the murders of both Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 40 years. After his conviction, details emerged that made the public even more disturbed. Huntley had a history of alleged sexual offenses going back years. Allegations involving underage girls that had been reported to police in Humberside before he ever moved to Soham. A major inquiry, the Bichard Inquiry, was launched to examine how Huntley had been able to pass background checks and gain employment at a school despite this history. It found serious failures in record-keeping and information sharing between police forces. Those failures had allowed a dangerous man to be placed in proximity to children. New laws and national databases for vetting people who work with children were introduced in the aftermath. Huntley's name became synonymous in the UK, not just with the murders themselves, but with the institutional failure. In prison, Huntley was not safe. He was attacked with boiling water thrown at him on one occasion. On another, his throat was slashed. He spent years reportedly in fear, kept apart from the general prison population for his own protection. None of that changed what had happened on that August evening in 2002. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman had 40 more years of life ahead of them. Ian Huntley took that from them in the space of an evening. On the 26th of February 2026, at HMP Frankland, a Category A prison in County Durham, housing some of England's most dangerous convicted criminals, Ian Huntley was attacked. He was 52 years old. Another inmate came at him with a makeshift weapon. Reports indicate Huntley was struck approximately 15 times. His injuries were catastrophic. The description that circulated was that his head had been split open. He was airlifted to hospital, placed on life support. His chance of survival was assessed at around 5%. He did not recover. Ian Huntley died on Saturday, the 7th of March, 2026. The Ministry of Justice issued a brief statement. It acknowledged that Huntley's crimes remained, in their words, one of the most shocking and devastating cases in the nation's history. It said their thoughts were with the families of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. The man who attacked Huntley was already serving time for murders of his own, including the rape and killing of a pregnant woman. There were no heroes in HMP Frankland that day, but Huntley was gone. After 23 years of a sentence that had a minimum 40-year term, he died before he had served even half of it. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman should be 34 years old today. They should have had careers, relationships, maybe families of their own. Instead, they are remembered as two 10-year-olds in matching red shirts, caught on a CCTV camera leaving a barbecue on a Sunday night in August. Their parents have carried this for 24 years. No prison sentence given to Ian Huntley, no attack in a prison yard changes that. Nothing brings them back. The Soham murders reshaped child protection legislation in the UK. They changed how police forces share information. They changed how schools vet employees. And for a generation of British people, the image of those two girls, happy, smiling, walking into the last night of their lives, is something that never fully leaves you. If you are watching this and you have children, hold them close. Tell them they can always come to you. Make sure the people in their lives are who they say they are. Holly and Jessica trusted someone they thought they knew. That trust was the last thing they ever gave him. Stay in the dark with me.